Breaking tonight, Canadian politics just entered uncharted territory. Mark Carney didn't just win an election, he rewired the entire political map. A brand new Spark Insights poll, conducted April 4th through 8th, with over 4,000 respondents nationwide, has just delivered numbers that no sitting Canadian Prime Minister has seen in decades. 65% approval, a 14-point lead in voting intention. And here is the part that should make every political strategist in Ottawa sit up straight. Majorities in every single region of the country, including Alberta, including Saskatchewan, including Manitoba, say they approve of the Carney government's performance. Let that satisfying detail sit for a moment. Alberta, 61% approval. Saskatchewan, 58%. Manitoba, 62%. These are provinces where Liberal prime ministers traditionally go to watch their approval ratings die. These are the provinces that turned Justin Trudeau into a political punchline. These are the provinces that were supposed to be Pierre Poilievre's firewall, his guaranteed base, his untouchable territory. That firewall is gone. Dear viewers, tonight I want to walk you through what these numbers actually mean. Not just the horse race, not just the percentages. I want you to understand why this particular poll might represent something Canada hasn't seen since Expo 67. A genuine national consensus. And I want you to hear what ordinary Canadians are saying about it, because their reactions tell us something the numbers alone cannot. Let's start with the top-line figures. The Liberals sit at 46% nationally, the Conservatives at 32%. That 14-point gap is built on overwhelming regional leads. 19 points ahead in British Columbia, 17 points ahead in Ontario, 20 points ahead of the Bloc Québécois in Quebec. These are not margins of victory, these are margins of domination. And this isn't a single outlier poll. Liaison Strategies released their own tracker on April 6, showing an 11-point Liberal lead. Ipsos has consistently placed the Liberals in majority government territory. Nanos Research earlier this year measured a 35-point gap between Carney and Poilievre on the question of who would make the best prime minister. Every major polling firm in the country is telling the same story. But here is where it gets genuinely fascinating. The Spark Insights poll measured public sentiment on 23 separate policy areas. 23 different topics where Canadians were asked whether the government's approach deserved a rating of good, acceptable, or poor. On all 23, a majority gave the government either a good or acceptable rating. Every single one. The highest-rated area was the government's effort to diversify Canada's trade relationships. That is not an accident. Canadians watched Mark Carney fly to Brussels, to Tokyo, to New Delhi, to London. They watched him sign agreements, open new markets, and build the kind of economic relationships that reduce Canada's dangerous dependence on a single trading partner to the south. And they noticed. They noticed because diversification isn't an abstract policy concept anymore. It's survival strategy. Every Canadian who watched Donald Trump threaten tariffs, threaten annexation, threaten the very sovereignty of this country understands that a prime minister who can pick up a phone and reach a dozen world capitals is a prime minister who is keeping them safe. 72% of Canadians gave a good or acceptable rating to the government's position on the U.S. and Israeli war against Iran. That's nearly 3/4 of the country agreeing with how Ottawa navigated one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints of this generation. Think about that. Foreign policy almost never polls this well. Canadians historically don't pay much attention to international affairs until they feel the consequences at home. The fact that 72% endorse the government's stance tells you something profound about the level of trust Carney has built. People believe he knows what he is doing on the world stage. Now, the poll did identify weak spots. Housing affordability and the cost of living remain the lowest-rated areas. That's honest, and it matters. Canadians are still struggling with rent. They're still watching grocery bills climb. They're still wondering when the promise of affordable housing will translate into keys in their hands. But here is the critical nuance. Even on housing and cost of living, a majority still rated the government's performance as good or acceptable. Not great, not glowing, but passing. And in a country where housing frustration has destroyed political careers, a passing grade on affordability is almost a miracle for a sitting government. What makes this poll truly historic, though, is what it reveals about partisan polarization, or rather, the sudden absence of it. Two-thirds of Canadians who voted NDP in the last election approve of the Carney government today. Two-thirds. These are voters who chose Jagmeet Singh, who believed the Liberals were too centrist, too corporate, too tied to Bay Street. And now the majority of them look at Mark Carney, a former central banker, a man who ran the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, and they say, yes, he's doing a good job. That is a realignment. That is NDP voters telling you that competence and results matter more than ideological purity. The same pattern holds with the Bloc Québécois. About two-thirds of BQ voters are satisfied with the federal government. In Quebec, where federal suspicion is practically a cultural tradition, where the Bloc exists precisely because Quebecers felt Ottawa didn't represent them, a supermajority of their voters now approve of what Ottawa is doing. That is seismic. And then there are the conservative defectors. 31% of Canadians who voted for Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives in the last election now approve of the Carney government. 1 in 3. These aren't soft partisans. These are people who walked into a voting booth, marked their ballot for Poilievre, and have since looked at the alternative and thought, actually, this is working. For a conservative leader trying to rebuild momentum, losing a third of your own voters' approval to the other side isn't a warning sign. It's a 5-alarm fire. Bruce Anderson, who leads Spark Insights and is one of Canada's most experienced pollsters, put it simply, Canada's new Prime Minister is accumulating political capital, not shedding it. That sentence deserves your full attention. In modern democracies, leaders almost universally lose support after taking office. The honeymoon ends, reality bites, promises collide with budgets. Carney is defying that gravity. His approval sits at 65%, a level that has held remarkably steady since he took office, never once dipping below 60%, even during the toughest months. Anderson noted something else that breaks the conventional political rulebook. Normally, when people feel pessimistic about the economy, they take it out on the government. They blame whoever is in charge. That's how politics has worked for generations. But right now, Canadians are separating their anxiety about economic challenges from their judgment of the government handling those challenges. They're worried about the economy, and they still think Carney is the right person to navigate it. That is not normal. That is exceptional. Anderson also highlighted the China-Canola arrangement. 78% of Canadians believe the deal Carney struck with Beijing on canola and automobiles was the right move. 78%. In a country that has spent years agonizing over its relationship with China, nearly 8 in 10 people back Carney's pragmatic approach. That tells you Canadians want a leader who can hold two ideas simultaneously. China is a strategic competitor, and China is a market worth engaging with on Canada's terms. What are Canadians actually saying about all of this? The public reaction has been striking. One commenter, Derek Dillabaugh, captured the mood in words that sound almost nostalgic. He called this an historic opportunity for Canada, comparing it to the national unity of the 1967 centennial. The challenges will be monumental, he wrote, but the opportunities are exceptional. Can we work together nationwide without political bitterness? Can we show compromise and compassion, innovation and ingenuity? A fascinating road ahead. That sentiment, that blend of cautious optimism and genuine excitement, is echoed across the country. Canadians aren't naive. They know the cost of living crisis is real. They know Trump isn't going away. They know the housing shortage won't fix itself overnight, but for the first time in years, they feel like the person at the top is actually competent enough to wrestle with these problems. Not just talk about them, not just tweet about them, actually wrestle with them. Sandy Richardson raised an interesting point about what these numbers might mean beneath the surface. She wanted to see respondents rank the importance of liberal priorities, arguing that understanding which policies matter most to Canadians would add a crucial layer of meaning to the approval scores. She's right. Knowing that 65% approve is powerful. Knowing which specific policies drive that approval would be transformative for anyone trying to understand where Canada is heading. Dear viewers, I want you to step back for a moment and consider the bigger picture. A year ago, Canadian politics was defined by polarization. Liberals versus conservatives, East versus West, urban versus rural, young versus old. Every conversation about Canada's future felt like a trench war. And now? Now you have a prime minister who is approved by majorities in every region, who is drawing support from voters across every major party, who is rated positively on every single policy area his government has touched. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when a leader does something Canadian politics hasn't seen in a very long time. He governed for everyone. Mark Carney didn't campaign on rage. He didn't build his base by telling one group of Canadians to hate another. He didn't win by dividing the country into us and them. He won by being the person in the room who actually understood the spreadsheet, who could explain why diversification mattered, who could walk into a meeting with European leaders and be treated as an equal. And now the numbers are reflecting something the pundits didn't predict. Competence is popular. Seriousness is popular. Having a plan is popular. If you're watching this tonight, I want you to think about what that means for the road ahead. Canada is entering a period where the old political rules don't apply. A Liberal Prime Minister is popular in Alberta. Conservative voters are defecting in meaningful numbers. NDP and BQ supporters are satisfied with a centrist government. The traditional map, the one every political commentator has drawn for decades, is being redrawn in real time. Will it last? That's the question everyone in Ottawa is asking. Housing and affordability remain vulnerabilities. Trump's trade threats haven't disappeared. The global economy is fragile. But right now, in this moment, something remarkable is happening. Canadians are choosing unity over division. They're choosing competence over outrage. And they're telling pollsters, in numbers that haven't been seen in a generation, that they believe their country is in capable hands. If this story matters to you, if you want to understand how Canada's political landscape is evolving, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We're tracking every shift, every deal, every policy move that shapes this country's future. Join a community that takes Canadian geopolitics seriously, because what's happening right now isn't just a polling bump, it's a realignment. This is Canada Next. I'll see you tomorrow.